just navigate to the site with download OpenSense, and then download the 64-bit version DVD, which will download the ISO and the New York. It will be fast. Click the download. And how a simple infrastructure will look like. A common infrastructure, even for a small or home office, would look like. Okay, so you have the internet service provider. Most of the time, after this, you have your home router, or your as normally also commonly known, the home modem. Or if it's a company, you could have the company small router or a bigger router, or kind of a routing device which will allow you to connect with the internet and with the service internet provider, of course. Then, because you need to protect your network from everything what goes from the internet inside, as well as nowadays more and more from actually inside as well. So everything what people try to do inside as well, they could use for protection firewall, as well as for monitoring the network and so on and so forth. All of this thing. Then you use this routing device we commonly know as a firewall. So what else you could do with the firewall? Uh, well, there are a lot of patches you could install on the firewall. You could do load balancing. So as in our case here, we're gonna try. If you have a website which people from internet accessing, and if you feel that this website there is an interest to it, then more and more people comes, and your bandwidth is the same actually. Your ability people to access is the same. So you could increase the bandwidth, and you could put an additional web server with the same content on it, and eventually you could apply a patch on the, or it's also called a plugin. You could apply a plugin on this firewall, and eventually after this you could have well, the product we're going to use here is called HA proxy. They have many names though, but you could have this load balancer which will help you out actually the content to balance in between two or more servers you're going to introduce. That's the same way if you would have used something in internet. Amazon and the other service provider, the other big cloud providers, they have these services pre-installed there, and very easy to set up and use almost right away. And the price for usage is very reasonable. So you could use this on the cloud with pre-installed and prepared, you know, facilities. So that's one of the ways we're talking about the firewalls. It's a routing device for sure. I mean, it has kind of routing function. In it, it's much more complex though. Now, most of the time you have two types of, in terms of how it's implemented. You have the software firewall, so you could install a simple computer, you could put more network interface cards, and you could install the firewall as a program inside and just use the program. Also, the software we have installed on our laptops, on our end device, it's a software firewall for sure when we're talking about it. It's mostly on the client version when you do it. That's the Defender of Microsoft, or in our case here we're using also Avast. There are many Kaspersky, Ghost, and so on and so forth. You could find out if you start looking. Most of the time the software firewall is a firewall which protects the end devices, not the networking devices. Now, the network firewall, most of the time, which protects the network itself, like in our case, most of the time it is a hardware device, or it is a program which is installed on a, as I mentioned, on a computer, Just you need to put more than one network interface because apparently you have at least two networks when we're talking about firewalls. You have a network which is connected to the internet, and you have also a network which is connected to the local net to the local area network. Now, in terms how the um, firewall filter the packets, because that's what the firewall does. It filters all the packets, incoming and outgoing packets. There are two types of firewalls as well. The most well-known, also called packet filtering, that's the initial name of any one of these devices. One of the well-known and used from before ones is the packet filtering one, or also nowadays known as stateless. So this packet filtering capabilities is exactly what it does. It filters the packets by specific rules. Well, we could implement this type of rules actually in a normal routing device. These rules are called access control lists. You have the extended access control lists and the time-based ones, named ones. If you remember from Cisco, you have from also the basic ones as well. So you could implement these rules, and you could say, okay, when this packet hits, which is coming from one direction and carries this type of information inside, when it hits the firewall, it's supposed to do this or that. Okay, and it's depending the networking of the network. It's dependable of the host IP addresses. It's dependable of the ports. You could play with a lot of parameters there, so you to make your internal network as secure as possible. So LAN, the local area network security, is the most important thing, which is the firewall actually taking care of in the common case. Some of the firewall producers even go a little bit further, so they create security zones, and the security zones indeed are something which Cisco implements. So you have in the LAN, the security zone is having a number 100. That's the biggest possible number to have. And then internet, it has a security zone number of 0, or in between 0, it's in a 0 actually. And everything else you could have in between 0 and 100. In that case is this network here called DMZ, demilitarized zone. So this numbers actually shows where the traffic could go and where it cannot go. So most of the time, from higher security level, the traffic could go to the lower one. Of course, with the access control lists, you could do some exceptions. It's a very good practice though to avoid this as much as possible. Or if you really need to do it, only specific ports and only specific direction, and very very specific things to be open on the firewall in direction which is not common. So actually, these red and green lines, that's what they introduce. Okay, so when I say out, it is from the perspective of the server here, server 1. When I say out, so if the server goes to internet, this by default is allowed on the internet. When I say in, this is from the perspective of the internet, meaning if somebody from the internet wants to go inside the local area network, this is supposed to and must be always forbidden. It's not supposed to be allowed in any case. Even as simple services like remote desktop connection, um, like SSH, stuff like that. Even if you're using VPN, or you could use as well the encryption keys and stuff like that, they must be avoided in any possible case. Okay, from the internet. So that's why this line here is very, very solid and red. Okay, that's what it means, and that's never will change. Now, when I was talking about the software firewalls, there are a couple of them you could install, as we mentioned, on a computer as a software with the operating system. Linux-based ones are very commonly used for this purpose. Now you have the ones which are integrated within the Red Hat based systems like CentOS 7 Fedora. This is Firewall D, which also works with the security zones. You have also the IP tables. Nowadays, IP tables actually dies, and there is another successor which will be there soon. PF tables, and on the Ubuntu and Debian based is the name of the software you could find out. So the uncomplicated firewall, or the UFW, it's kind of the defender of Microsoft. So this is a little bit about the this type of firewalling. The other type of firewalling, which nowadays even the free firewalls have it, and that's what it goes in this industry, is the stateful packet filtering. So that means if you try to access from this server a particular website in the internet, there will be a three-way handshake in between the both. So as soon as you send your SYN ACK, the the firewall will know that you expect a reply. So basically, you don't need to open any port. The firewall will open by itself because it knows that this site you want to access. So it's kind of artificial kind of intelligence for the firewalls, how they work. It's called stateful filtering. It's very, very common nowadays, and most of the firewalls switching to this one. Even the ones which I mentioned before, IP tables, they do this. They do this. Now, something which is interesting here as well. So imagine if this side door, which is on from outside, starts to sending you back. Most of the time, you receive if you have a small web server, let's say, in your demilitarized zone. By the way, the demilitarized zone is used since the local area network zone is very highly protected and nothing from outside could come inside. Well, if you have a mail server, if you have a DNS server which you'd like to share with the outside, if you have a web server or some other services you would like people from outside to use, basically then you create the demilitarized zone, because in that case, for this zone, you open some ports, so it's not so protected as the local area network zone. So meaning, in that case, if somebody try to access it and to intrude it, it might be possible to be done. So if something gets infected here, you don't want this infection to get inside, or this intruder to get inside of your local area network. That's why, from the perspective of the DMZ, the red solid line which has in, so if you would like from the DMZ to go inside your LAN, it's always red and solid. It never allows you to do this from the DMZ, because otherwise your LAN would be easily compromised. So these two red solid lines are very, very important. They're very, very, very important. Once again, the green ones, when you see here, the green lines from the LAN to the internet and from the LAN to the DMZ, they are still not actually green. Not all the ports are open. Indeed, they're supposed to be dashed like I showed here. Okay, so this is how it goes in this DMZ interfaces. Yeah, I was talking about the stateful and stateless firewall. I hope you get a little bit of the idea. The stateful is the one which everybody is using nowadays. It is really powerful and kind of artificial intelligence inside, which helps prevents more efficiently the threats. So the other thing is that we mentioned that we have software which most of the time goes to the end devices, uh, and the network, which is protecting the network as the firewall. I mean, this is for the client devices and for the network actually. You have a software based and you have hardware based. And now hardware based means they have produced specific appliances for specifically for firewall protection. There are millions of producers of this out there. Some of them are free, some of them are not free. Well, when I say free, basically the community version which they propose to the people to install by themselves actually is having most of the features there for free. Uh, the proprietary version, indeed, actually the difference is that you have a support most of the time. There is no difference between the version. And actually this is the way, through a huge community, organized community, the provider to improve the firewall itself for very low cost. So that's why this schema of the open source or free software or free based firewalls is done. Now we're talking about, if we're talking about a provider like pfSense, so pfSense actually is free if you download it. It's from where OpenSense actually originates. So initial firewall was called monowall. Then from monowall, fork called pfSense was produced. pfSense at the moment is one of the most used free software, free firewalls, and OpenSense, which is getting very close as usage and as popularity as pfSense, is a fork out of pfSense because they were free, right? Now pfSense also has instead of the not only the community version, they have also the professional version, and the difference is kind of basically you have only technical support, as well as they're producing the devices. Okay, so the devices they produce are having their operating system, and when you buy the device, actually you buy also the support for a couple of years. So it is that's how it goes with the free. There is it's not really free indeed, but you could use and you could practice all the features for free, and it's a good idea to do it because first of all they're user friendly, organized. Most of the time you work through the graphical interface and from a web interface, and you could learn about much more used and much more professional, let's say, firewalls used in big enterprises like Cisco, Palo Alto, WatchGuard, Checkpoint, and so on and so forth. There are many providers, and all of them are good. Another good trademark and kind of unique, especially for small and mid-size, we use in the other location, and for our lab there, it's called MikroTik. It is home router with very nice firewall inside. The firewall you're using mostly using the IP tables inside. So an example of a completely free firewall would be either firewall D or IP tables installed on a free CentOS 7 machine. So that's would be one. It could be used as a client, and it could be used for a small network as a networking protection. So for completely free, you could use very powerful hardware. I'm sorry, very powerful software-based firewall to protect yourself. Now, that's mostly in the Linux world. In the Unix world, it's PF packet filtering is called the packet which and the daemon which is in charge with the packet filtering and the firewalling. Most of these firewalls which I mentioned, pfSense IP tables, I'm sorry, pfSense and the OpenSense, they're using Unix. So Unix is a little bit, well, more than a little bit, I would say, used for these free firewalls. There is one which is based on Linux and which is kind of very good. It's called IP-Fire. So I could suggest you guys, if you would like to install something for yourself, if you have a free spare computer at home, even not very powerful, old one, just buy another one or two additional network interface card, put there in the empty slots, and start installing IP-Fire. It's very user friendly. It's very easy. It's not so powerful like pfSense and Open Sense, but you could learn the firewalling easily, and it has a lot of additions you could put on it, intrusion detection, and it's very user friendly. So if you would like to learn about the firewalls, you need to start learning about the firewalls slowly from the perspective of using it and setting it up. I would say this is the one you could start even protecting your home network. It's very nice. It's based on Linux. So IP-Fire is the name. So basically, you could install it on a virtual machine as well. So if you have a virtual infrastructure with the ESXi, Hyper-V, Zen, and so on and so forth, you could install the firewall as a virtual machine, and actually you could connect all the other machines through this virtual machine, the traffic to go through it, and indeed you're going to have a software firewall within your virtual machine. I know lots of companies which are doing this. It's kind of free. This is what I want to say about the firewalls in general. Any questions, guys?